America 1899. New York. Brooklyn. Al Capone, criminal boss. Alphonse Gabriel Al Capone was born on January 17, 1899, in Brooklyn, New York City, into a working-class Italian immigrant family. His father, Gabriele Capone, was a barber, and his mother, Teresa Raiola, was a seamstress who raised a large household and tried to keep her children tied to family rules and steady work. The Capones came from southern Italy, the Naples area, joining many immigrant families building new lives in crowded Brooklyn neighborhoods at the turn of the century. Al grew up speaking English in the streets, but hearing Italian at home, surrounded by poverty, cramped housing, and the pressure to earn money early. As a boy, Capone attended public school in Brooklyn and learned to read and write, but he struggled with discipline and authority. A widely repeated account says that around 19,131,914, in his early teens, he dropped out after a serious incident in which he struck a teacher during an argument. Whatever the exact details, he left formal education young and shifted toward street life and low-paying jobs. In his teens, he worked a string of gritty New York jobs running errands and doing manual labor while spending more time with neighborhood groups that blurred the line between clubs and gangs. By the mid-1910s, he was drawn into the orbit of organized street gangs and began associating with the 5 Points Gang, a major criminal network recruiting young men from immigrant neighborhoods. That period taught him how to project toughness, build loyalty, and use intimidation skills he later scaled into a larger system. A defining early event came in 1917 when he was working at a Coney Island saloon and dance hall known as the Harvard Inn. After he insulted a woman, her brother, often identified as Frank Galucio, slashed Capone's face in a fight, leaving scars that led to the nickname Scarface, which Capone disliked. The incident also showed how quickly reputations were made and damaged, reinforcing his obsession with respect. By 1918, Capone had married Mary Coughlin, and in 1919 they had a son, Albert Francis Sonny Capone. Around 19,191,920, as Prohibition approached and criminal opportunities expanded, he left New York for Chicago. There, the lessons of his Brooklyn youth family hardship, a young exit from school, hustling for wages, and drifting from small gangs toward bigger rackets could be scaled up dramatically. In 1919, Al Capone left New York for Chicago, drawn by the promise of bigger money and invited into the orbit of Johnny Torrio, an older, smarter organizer who understood politics as well as violence. Chicago in those years was a city of factories, unions, immigrant blocks, and corrupt deals, and it was also a city preparing for a national earthquake. Prohibition, which began in 1920 and turned alcohol into a goldmine. Capone's first role was not boss, but muscle and management, the kind of man who could collect debts, intimidate rivals, guard shipments, and keep street crews loyal. He learned quickly that the real engine of power was not a single gunfight, but a system. Breweries, trucks, drivers, storage, speakeasies, payoffs, lawyers, and political protection. When Prohibition arrived, Torrio pushed hard to enter bootlegging, but Colosimo resisted, and in May 1920 Colosimo was assassinated, after which Torrio effectively took over. Capone's position rose immediately because Torrio needed men he trusted, and Capone was aggressive, disciplined on the street level, and willing to do the ugly work others avoided. Bootlegging was not romantic. Shipments got hijacked, drivers got beaten, bars got burned, and every new territory came with a price in blood or money. Capone helped organize protection rackets around saloons and speakeasies, where owners paid for security, and refusal often led to smashed windows, broken bones, or worse. As the 1920s rolled on, the underworld became more corporate, and Capone became the face of a new style. Flashy suits, public visibility, and a reputation built on both fear and generosity. But behind the image, the work was relentless, and violence was not occasional, it was structural, used to keep the machine running. The most dangerous pressure came from rival gangs, especially on the north side of Chicago, where Irish-dominated crews fought to control the same alcohol routes and the same neighborhoods. This rivalry hardened into a cycle. One side hits a truck, the other side retaliates at a bar, then someone gets executed in broad daylight, and the city tries to pretend it is just gangsters. Capone also learned that elections mattered, because the easiest way to keep police away was to own the town hall, or at least to own the men who owned it. In 1924, the outfit shifted major operations into Cicero, a suburb outside Chicago's city limits, and local politics there turned into intimidation, ballot manipulation, and street terror. The logic was simple. If Chicago was too hot, you move the base, and you buy a safer zone where raids become misunderstandings and arrests become temporary inconveniences. In that same era, Capone's circle included brothers, cousins, and loyal gunmen, and the line between family and business was deliberately blurred to strengthen trust. Then the war escalated, and the turning point came in 1925, when Johnny Torrio was badly wounded in an assassination attempt and stepped back, leaving Capone as boss. Capone was still young, but he now controlled a large network of bootlegging, gambling, and prostitution, and he protected it the way a state protects borders by punishing intrusions fast. In practical terms, that meant ordering beatings of hijackers, disappearing informants, and launching retaliatory strikes when rivals challenged his control. Some killings in this period were not personal duels, but business messages, staged to be seen and understood by everyone who might be tempted to switch sides. Capone also relied on a brutal logic of incentives. You could be paid well for loyalty, but betrayal could cost you your legs, your hands, or your life. The gang war with the North Side grew especially vicious, with attempts on Capone and his men, and with the city hearing constant rumors of ambushes, car chases, and bodies dumped far from the shooting. In 1926, Capone's organization came under intense scrutiny after a high-profile killing that caused public outrage, and he went into hiding for a time as pressure mounted. Yet hiding did not mean surrender, because his machine could operate without him in the room, using trusted lieutenants to keep money flowing and threats delivered. Capone's public image, however, remained strangely mixed, because he sometimes posed as a businessman, donated to charity, and presented himself as a provider during hard times. That mixture philanthropy on the surface, violence underneath helped him survive politically, because some officials preferred a predictable gangster to an unpredictable street war. But the war did not cool, and by the late 1920s the conflict was reaching a kind of deadly climax, driven by revenge, territory, and the humiliation of previous hits. On February 14, 1929, the Street Valentine's Day massacre shocked the nation, as 7 men linked to the North Side were lined up and shot, and Capone's name dominated headlines, even without a conviction. The massacre damaged the gangster celebrity aura, because it looked less like underworld rivalry and more like organized slaughter, and it pushed influential citizens to demand action. Local enforcement had been compromised for years, but federal pressure grew, and investigators focused on the angle that could actually stick in court: money. Capone could evade murder charges through fear, bribery, and witness silence, but income and taxes created a paper battlefield where intimidation was less effective. In 1931, the federal government indicted Capone for income tax violations, and later that year he was convicted and sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. The irony was brutal. The man linked in the public mind with shootings and bombings was finally caged not for a single headline murder, but for accounting and proof of income. Prison broke the myth of invincibility, because the outfit could continue without him, and leadership began shifting to other figures who were less famous and more careful. Capone served time in federal facilities, and by the mid-1930s he was held at Alcatraz, the island prison designed to isolate inmates from outside influence and corruption. Behind bars, his body and mind began to deteriorate, in large part due to long-standing syphilis, which later progressed into severe neurological damage. The man who once controlled a city's fear was increasingly confused, weaker, and less able to command anything beyond his own daily routine. In 1939, Capone was paroled and withdrew to Florida, living under the shadow of his former name, but without the sharpness that had built his empire. He spent his final years largely out of the spotlight, surrounded by family, guarded memories, and a reputation that the public still found both frightening and strangely fascinating. On January 25, 1947, Al Capone died in Miami Beach, Florida, ending one of the most infamous arcs of the Prohibition era. That was Al Capone's life, a rise built on fear and ambition, and a fall that came not from bullets, but from consequences he could no longer escape. If you found this story interesting and enjoyed it, please support us with a subscription, a comment, and a like that really helps the channel grow. This was Living Stories. See you in the next story.